And as if in answer, there came from far away another note. Horns, horns, horns. In dark Mindoluine's sides, they dimly echoed. Great horns of the north wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last. As the days grew dark in Gondor, the Dark Lord Sauron delivered many armies of orcs, Easterlings, Haradrim, and others to Minas Tirith during the final month of the War of the Ring. The siege of Minas Tirith became the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, for most of the skirmishes were pushed out into the fields of Pelennor when the Rohirrim arrived at dawn on March 15th of 3019 of the Third Age. If not for the heroes of Rohan, Gondor would have surely fallen, and the West would have followed. Sauron would have had victory had it not been for the Red Arrow of Gondor being delivered to Theoden King, asking for the aid of the Rohirrim. Theoden brought his Eotheid, thousands of riders, to the battlefield, and made ready for the glorious charge that would stave off the Witch King's forces from completely pouring into the White City. Hence is the account of Rohan's greatest hour as told in the Rite of the Rohirrim chapter in The Return of the King. Now is the hour come, riders of the Mark, sons of Eorl. Foes and fire are before you, and your homes far behind. Yet though you fight upon an alien field, the glory that you reap there shall be your own forever. Oaths ye have taken, now fulfill them all, to lord and land and league of friendship. Men clashed spear upon shield. Eomer, my son, you lead the first Eorid, said Theoden, and it shall go behind the king's banner in the center. Elfhelm, lead your company to the right when we pass the wall, and Grimbold shall lead his towards the left. Let the other companies behind follow these three that lead, as they have chance. Strike wherever the enemy gathers. Other plans we cannot make, for we know not yet how things stand upon the field. Forth now, and fear no darkness. The leading company rode off as swiftly as they could, for it was still deep dark, whatever change Widfara might forebode. Merry was riding behind Durnhelm, clutching with the left hand, while with the other he tried to loosen his sword in its sheath. He felt now bitterly the truth of the old king's words. In such a battle, what would you do, Meriadoc? Just this, he thought. Encumber a rider, and hope at best to stay in my seat and not be pounded to death by galloping hoofs. It was no more than a league to where the outwalls had stood. They soon reached them, too soon for Merry. Wild cries broke out, and there was some clash of arms, but it was brief. The orcs busy about the walls were few and amazed, and they were quickly slain or driven off. Before the ruin of the north gate in the Ramos, the king halted again. The first Eorid drew up behind him and about him on either side. Durnhelm kept close to the king, though Elfhelm's company was away on the right. Grimbold's men turned aside and passed round to a great gap in the wall further eastward. Merry peered from behind Durnhelm's back. Far away, maybe 10 miles or more, there was a great burning, but between it and the riders, lines of fire blazed in a vast crescent, at the nearest point less than a league distant. He could make out little more on the dark plain, and as yet he neither saw any hope of morning, nor felt any wind, changed or unchanged. Now silently the host of Rohan moved forward into the field of Gondor, pouring in slowly but steadily, like the rising tide through breaches in a dike that men have thought secure. But the mind and will of the Black Captain were bent wholly on the falling city, and as yet no tidings came to him warning that his designs held any flaw. After a while the king led his men away somewhat eastward, to come between the fires of the siege and the outer fields. Still they were unchallenged, and still Theoden gave no signal. At last he halted once again. The city was now nearer. A smell of burning was in the air and a very shadow of death. The horses were uneasy, but the king sat upon Snowmane, motionless, gazing upon the agony of Minas Tirith, as if stricken suddenly by anguish or by dread. He seemed to shrink down, cowed by age. Merry himself felt as if a great weight of horror and doubt had settled on him. His heart beat slowly. Time seemed poised in uncertainty. They were too late. Too late was worse than never. Perhaps Theoden would quail, bow his old head, turn, slink away to hide in the hills. Then suddenly, Merry felt it at last, beyond doubt, a change. Wind was in his face, light was glimmering. Far, far away in the south, the clouds could be dimly seen as remote gray shapes, rolling up, drifting. Morning lay beyond them. But at that same moment there was a flash, as if lightning had sprung from the earth beneath the city. For a searing second it stood dazzling far off in black and white, its topmost tower like a glittering needle, and then, as the darkness closed again, there came rolling over the fields a great boom. At that sound, the bent shape of the king sprang suddenly erect. Tall and proud he seemed again, and rising in his stirrups he cried in a loud voice, more clear than any there had ever heard a mortal man achieve before. "Arise, arise, riders of Theoden! Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter. Spear shall be shaken, shield be splintered. A sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises. Ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor!" With that he seized a great horn from Guthlaf, his banner-bearer, and he blew such a blast upon it that it burst asunder. And straightway all the horns in the host were lifted up in music, and the blowing of the horns of Rohan in that hour was like a storm upon the plain and a thunder in the mountains. "Ride now, ride to Gondor!" Suddenly the king cried to Snowmane, and the horse sprang away. Behind him his banner blew in the wind, white horse upon a field of green, but he outpaced it. After him thundered the knights of his house, but he was ever before them. Eomer rode there, the white horsetail on his helm floating in his speed, and the front of the first Eorid roared like a breaker foaming to the shore, but Theoden could not be overtaken. Fey he seemed, or the battle fury of his fathers ran like new Tyre in his veins, and he was borne up on Snowmane like a god of old, even as Orome the Great in the Battle of the Valar when the world was young. His golden shield was uncovered, and lo, it shone like an image of the sun, and the grass flamed into green about the white feet of his steed. For morning came, morning and a wind from the sea, and the darkness was removed, and the hosts of Mordor wailed, and terror took them, and they fled, and died, and the hoofs of wrath rode over them. And then all the host of Rohan burst into song, and they sang as they slew, for the joy of battle was on them. And the sound of their singing that was fair and terrible came even to the city. Thus ends the telling of the ride of the Rohirrim from the return of the king. The Rohirrim would go on to battle for the rest of that morning and day, even after the Witch King slew Theoden and was himself slain. Eomer would become the new king of the Mark, and his ally and friend Aragorn, along with his company, would come to the battle upon the ships of the Corsairs. With all of the combined strength of man, elf, dwarf, hobbit, and wizard, Mordor's forces would be scattered and felled. The sun would shine again upon the Tower of the Guard, and the free peoples would live to fight another day, to bring an end to Sauron's menace. From the ride of the Rohirrim we see unfettered virtue and valor. It was the purity of heart, love, courage, and friendship that inspired the Rohirrim to face the odds and save the world. In a time with plenty of darkness and fear in our world, we must ourselves hold steadfast with such virtues and stay true to our oaths, just as the Rohirrim did for the oath of Eorl the Young to Cirion the Steward. Thus we may safeguard all that is good on this earth. Hey guys, Yoistin here, and I want to thank you all for watching another episode of our Brought to Life series. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to hit that like button and share this video with a friend. For this video's source, and for the passage that was brought to life in this video, please check out The Lord of the Rings and specifically The Return of the King. Let me know your thoughts about the ride of the Rohirrim in the comments below. This is one of my favorite moments in the entirety of Tolkien's works, for it depicts just how great and heroic all people can be. Also, please be sure to check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Loot Crate partnership in the description below. This is the last week that my partnership with Loot Crate to order their Lord of the Rings crate shall be open, so please use the link in the description or the coupon code Yoistin for 15% off of the crate. And to hear my thoughts about all of the recent Lord of the Rings news about the Tolkien movie, Amazon show, and more, please check out the Western S podcast on our Patreon. The link is in the description. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with part 1 of Isildur's epic character history. As always, guys, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.